Hello. I just finished Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I have no idea what didn't even see that, what a character assessment is or what you told me to make, but I just put this on my whiteboard. It's really hard to read, but trust me, I'm gonna read it to you. I love Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes because obviously I love snow. So I broke Snow down into 3 categories: his psych, his childhood, and his actions. And starting off with the psych, I find Snow's mind so interesting because I made like a mini Maslow's hierarchy, and the notes kind of at the bottom, along with like shelter, food, and everything needed to be alive. Snow. I put his name on the bottom of the pyramid because I feel like to him, being a snow is being alive. His name is what makes him alive, and it's a driving factor for most of his actions. Even when he's poor and he's still suffering, like throughout the war, and then he's poor after the war in the academy, he's still a snow. He'll never let anybody know he's struggling. And psychologically, that is a heavy toll. He's seen a lot of things. Everyone's been through the war, but no one talks about it. They're like, oh, that was just rough. It was more than rough, and it psychologically scarred him. But no matter what, he always maintained the mentality, I am a snow. So his name means a lot to him, obviously. The war, he watched his maid get her leg taken off by one of her friends' father. I think it was like listeria or something. So that psychologically, he never realized he was edible, and that's more motivation to stay alive. So, Snow and war, his father's a war general, so, that even makes it more meaningful. He believes he needs to live. He needs to do something great because he survived all this. He has his last name. His father is this major war hero. Actually, I also want to add his mother to his childhood because his mother is very important. But yes, the 3 C's. I find this very interesting. After he went into the Hunger Games, he developed his 3 C's: chaos, control, something else. But I think the main thing about Snow is he is afraid because, as I said, he grew up in a wartime. He grew up without parents. He grew up in a time where he didn't really have that security, that children need. And this kind of made him grow up to be a control freak, as we can see with his relationship with Lucy, obviously. But he has this belief that without control, without order, without rules, the Hunger Games is what the world would be. And that's just kind of what the Capitol made him think because, propaganda, war, that's all they spout. So I put wealthy, fame, and power because I found that very interesting. When he ran away with Lucy, all he was like, well, now I can't be wealthy, powerful, or famous. What's the point of living? And it's so interesting because, usually love or relationship is like higher in the hierarchy, but to him, he never really had love. Lucy's his first love. Lucy's his first kiss. Like, he doesn't really know what love is, but what he does know is power. What he does know is fame. What he does know is wealth. And that is satisfying to him. And it's kind of sad because the contrast, I found this contrast very beautiful between this capital bred boy who's old money, he doesn't really know anything but his old ways, and Lucy, who is from the district, she's from the Covey, she's very free, she's like a bird. It's very ironic because she's like a mockingjay. Side note, if I was President Snow and I saw Katniss Everdeen off the map, I'm not making a spectacle. You're telling me some tribute reminds me of my first love? I'm wiping her off. It doesn't need to be a whole thing. That was his issue. Snow's whole issue is he feels like the world needs to know, and that's not how it works because he kind of grew up in secrecy, like Dr. Gall, High Bottom, his father and High Bottom in the Hunger Games. All these things are secret. Even his own Hunger Games is secret. Nobody knows about it because it was wiped and it was a mistake. So he now feels like when people see and when people like watch, they absorb more because he realized nobody's watching from the districts. The Hunger Games are basically useless in the districts because there's no TV. And what's the point of the Hunger Games if the districts can't watch? But now when he's president, he makes it, I don't know how to describe it. He makes it oh boy. He makes it impaired, and what's the word I'm looking for? Whatever. He just makes it important that everybody sees the Hunger Games and everybody understands that this is because of the rebellion. Whatever. He's poor kid. No parents. When Snow's president, his mate getting cannibalized, poor. He's a Snow lands on top, old money, his mother. All these things like really built him when he grew up because no parents. He just grew up with his grandma. She's very old style. All he had was tigers basically. And that's something I found interesting. He never really had true friends. He never really had someone he could open up to. Like, it's kind of ironic because Sejanus being one of the things he's supposed to hate, like Sejanus' district, but Sejanus is more rich than him, but Sejanus despises his money. And that kind of gets under his skin because the thing about Sejanus and Snow is that Sejanus was a child. Snow is more mature because Sejanus didn't really think things through. He was trying to do things for the greater good. He had this moral compass, and it wasn't really pushed by money. But let's be realistic. Money is what rules the world. So seeing that Sejanus had everything, the Plunks have everything, and the Snows have nothing, it kind of grew this hatred within Snow, obviously. And Sejanus never really cared for it. He always wanted to go back to 2. And I find that so interesting because that's something Snow can never comprehend. When you have everything and you would choose to go back to the districts, you would choose to be a rebel, you would choose to throw it all away and become a peacekeeper. It's absurd. So I kind of think it's interesting how those two kind of became best friends, like complete opposites, kind of, well, you know. But in the end, it wasn't surprising that Snow betrayed him because Snow's land on top. That's all he cares about. All he cares about is his family name because that's all he has. Without being a Snow, what is he? Because he's built this persona of no matter what, I have to present myself as prestige. My father is a war general. My mother is this lovely lady. And honestly, it's really rough because he never had any relationships because he was just so focused on keeping his Snow name. Like, he said people were interested in him, but what mattered most was keeping that prestigious, elegant energy of a Snow. And that's when he met Lucy Bird. I'm just gonna say Lucy Gray. Lucy Gray and Sejanus turned his world upside down because Lucy reminds him of his mother. Now I love this because psychologically he misses comfort. All Snow does is work. He wants to get money, he wants to be great, he wants to be famous. Hell, he wants to be president because that's all his grandma talks about, and he doesn't want to disappoint her, even if she's horrible at singing. It's whatever. What matters most to him is his family and his name. But Lucy and Sejanus challenge this whole concept he has because these are two people that are from the districts, but yet they are the closest people to him. I'd argue they're closer than even his family because Lucy sings. And do you know what, I can't even say his first name. And do you know what Snow thinks of when he thinks of his mother? He thinks of her voice, he thinks of her compact, he thinks of that smell. So it's like he's kind of drawn to Lucy. And Lucy's attractive. I mean, there's attractive people in the Capitol, but he's a Snow. He's like, these are my colleagues. The Hunger Games kind of bonds Lucy and Snow in a way that both of their fates are tied. Because, like I said, at the bottom, being a Snow is like food to him. It is his shelter. If he loses his home, if he loses the Hunger Games, if he loses that plinth prize, he's out. He'd rather be dead. He'd rather be dead than live on the street because he's a Snow. He has that name. That's all he has. And Lucy gives him this new perspective of, what about love? What about somebody who cares about you for you and not your name? Because Lucy doesn't know what a fucking Snow is. She thinks it's white stuff that's on the ground. Lucy just was rounded up from the Hunger Games, and she got her little get back at Mayfair for stealing her man. And you know what? This like animosity, this personality she has actually drives Snow, because he doesn't know anybody like that in the Capitol. Because as much as he hates her, the Capitol and districts aren't that far apart. Because think about it. If the Capitol was starving, imagine the districts had to do so many worse things. And you know what? Even Tigris had to do worse things for him. And that's how the world goes. That's how world is in wartime. And Lucy is kind of this new light shined on the districts. Even though she's cubby, she's still like from the districts. It's Capitol or districts. And I really love their relationship. It's such a shame, but it's not surprising because Snow is like food to him. He needs to be worthy of his name, even if it means sacrificing love. He married Livia Codger, I think that's her name. Like, he married one of the bitchiest people in his class purely because he's like, I need to be able to focus on my name. I need to do what needs to be done. He's like, I can't be swayed by love. I can't be swayed by all these different things. And he even, like, in the end, he gives up on love and he chooses power. And it's how he lasted so long. Like, I think he was like, what, the 80th, 82nd, like, Hunger Games before Katniss came around. But it's so interesting that Lucy was the only person he just met that could touch his heart and change him in a way that nobody has in all the years he's been alive. So, same thing with Sejanus. He never even really wanted to be friends with him, but like he threw in the towel because this kid is sad. It's so interesting because Snow is smart. He notices things, and he's like, even though I hate Sejanus, he hates himself. Like, he hates that he's here with me, and it's like, I think that's punishment enough. But Snow only cares about himself in the end, and even as a child, it's like he never had parents, or he never really experienced that love. I mean, he may have had it when he was really younger, but he doesn't remember. He only has his memories of war and growing up poor and always fighting to get to the top. And you know what? And that is why High Bottom and Gull are so important, because, they challenge that. They challenge it in a way that Gull is pressing him. Gull is evil. She's pressing him. She's saying, what's the point of the games? Like, what can you offer? Write this paper. And it's not like he's ever thought like this before. Gull's just crazy. And High Bottom, he's just along for the ride. He's a loser. I hated him the whole time. But Gull kind of changes Snow's character because she provides a new perspective of the games. She's the game maker. She's, he's a mentor, so he has to always go to her. And Gull is always so interested in Snow because out of all the people in the Capitol, the Snows have definitely struggled the most. Even early in the book, when they were when each mentor was given a district, it was obvious that, if you had more money or if you had like more sway, you'd get the better candidate. And it didn't even matter. He got the District 12 girl. Forgive me, I'm a Snow. I've survived the war. I've worked hard all my life, and you give me a District 12 girl? Especially when Jessup is like Hercules, and you see how like He's driven because all that matters to him is his name, and I can understand that. I don't think Snow has done anything wrong. In fact, even in the end when he runs away from Lucy, it's for self-preservation. He's worried. He thinks that he can have a life with her because he's like, oh, my capital life is screwed. Once they find that gun, I'm out. Like, what if I become a high officer and they're like, oh, you know that gun with your DNA that killed the mayor's daughter? Because that's what happened. He helped Lucy, he extended his hand out, and is sent into the districts. From the capital straight to the districts. On his night that he won the Hunger Games. Ain't that a bitch? And so he doesn't ever want to open himself up like that again because he did it for love. I'm not even gonna lie, Lucy Gray is smart, yes, but he saved her life with the snakes, with that napkin. He also saved her life with, like, the food. It was him who first came to see his tribute, and he was like, let me establish a relationship with her. He went above and beyond, and you know what? That really bonded him to her. And the fact that he was able to walk away from that and pick the capital, that's given him nothing, by the way. The capital's given him nothing, it's taken everything from him, but he still picks it. Do you want to know why? Because he's Snow. He belongs in the capital. He doesn't belong in love. He doesn't think about happiness. That is the bottom of his pyramid. The bottom of his pyramid is he has to be a Snow. So if you're a Snow and you're on top and you have everything, love doesn't matter. It's insufficient. It doesn't reach. But Highbottom, God, Highbottom is such a contradicting character for the fact that this resentment Highbottom has for his father kind of lights a fire under Snow, because he's like, I'm not my father. In fact, he wants to be like his father. He has this thing in him because everyone's like, oh, you look so much like your father. Oh, you act so much like your father. And you know, when you hear that, you're like, but I never really knew him like that. So you're like, what is this connection we have? So he has his father's shadow. And then he has Highbottom, who's dick riding him 24/7. And Pluribus, like, hey, you know, your father and Highbottom, you know, they were buds back in the day, but something happened. And it makes so much sense that a Snow would hear the idea of the Hunger Games and present it as his own, and not tell Highbottom, like, oh, you know, remember that idea we had when we were drunk? I told it to Dr. Gall. Like, Highbottom found out through Gall, and it's such a terrifying thing, because when I heard that Highbottom was like a drug addict, I'm like, the capital is a place for, like, the rich and fancy. You don't become a drug addict for fun. Like, it's either because of the war or because, you know, you're dealing with some stuff. You know, when we have trauma, we always look for ways of relief. And as we can see, the capital offers therapy and so many caring ways of relief. So I'd become a drug addict too. But Highbottom has this disdain for Snow because, honestly, he has a right to. Because Snow even continues the game his entire life up until he dies. Because Snow is a conservative. Snow is old money. He hates Sejanus. He relatively hates the districts. He thinks the Hunger Games are to punish the districts, when really they're just control and show of power. And even Highbottom can see in Snow's eyes, Snow wants what his father had. He wants that power, that pull, that name. Snow lands on top. He wants to be on top. And even if I hated Highbottom, it's like he was right, because Snows are grimy. They'll always do what it takes to get to the top, and it doesn't matter because they have nothing else to lose. And it's such a tragedy, it really is. But that's the person, so that's what he grew up to be. He knew nothing else. He never knew love. The love he has is his mother's rose flower compact or whatever. And you know what? He even threw that away when he started associating that with Lucy. He associated, like, oh, I love singing. Lucy sings, I love Lucy. Like, there's so many things between Lucy and his mother. And even Lucy said that Snow reminds her of his father, of her father who died. So it's like that comfort we seek in our parents. And you know how we find our definition of everything from our parents. We find love, We find how we interact with people from our parents. We find so many things from our parents. They found each other because they kind of remind each other of the other one's parents. And then when he kind of threw away Lucy, he threw away everything of his mother. And his mother is kind of that soft part of him. Because what his father was a hardened general. His father was Crisis Snow or whatever. This person who hated the districts. And his mother was the person who smelled like roses. Was the person who mothered him. Was the person who showed him love and sang to him. Spent time with him while his father was doing his fuck shit. And associating that with a person and then throwing it all away, what else are you throwing away? You know, what else are you sacrificing? But it doesn't mean anything to him, because all he cares about is being a Snow. All he cares about is wealth, fame, and power. All he cares about is honestly living up to his name and his father's image. When I don't care. When Snow was president, his grandma would always say, when Snow's president, this is building something within him. Because he doesn't want to be a disappointment. He's a Snow. Oh. And honestly, I think when Snow got sent to the Peacekeepers, that is probably like one of the worst things that could have happened, because all it did was just align him more with his father. He was more soft-hearted in the capital, and he was more focused on his studies and going to the future. But what peacekeeping did was it showed him people. Because people are mean, people are brutal, people will do whatever it takes to survive. And you know what? If the capital was starving during the war, the districts were in famine. So he sees these rural people, he sees these poor people who don't know the comforts he knows. He thinks they're dirty, he thinks they're all this and that. And he finds it like insulting to be a Snow in their presence. But you know what? He's down with them because he's a peacekeeper and he's witnessing it. That's kind of why I hate Gaul, because Gaul gave him another perspective. Because if he thought, oh, the Hunger Games was so awful, Gaul tried to kill me. Alright. So Gaul took herself out of the equation and threw him in the districts with power as a peacekeeper. He still got busted in the lip. He still was worried about seeing Lucy. He still was worried about getting caught. He still was worried about Sejanus. Nothing changed from the capital. He still had all these worries. He worried about his family. He worried about all this. And he had power. He was a peacekeeper. He was a soldier. And he still had the same worries. So Gaul literally removed that district and capital like in between he used to have. And I hate Gaul so much, but she's a psychological genius. But honestly, I think that Snow is peak. I feel like everything he did makes sense, and it's not. You can dislike him, of course, but it's fitting for his character because it's what he knows. Oh, now, missing anything? No, it's like 23 minutes. I'm like ranting. Phenomenal book.